It is 3 in the morning. The body is completely exhausted, weighed down by the physical need to rest. Yet the mind remains aggressively alert, tracking the passing minutes on a digital clock. This specific state of wakefulness is the hallmark of clinical insomnia. The disorder is strictly defined as having persistent difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up far earlier than intended, even when the environment is completely conducive to rest. The consequences of this sleeplessness extend deep into the following day. Sufferers experience profound physical fatigue, impaired cognitive function, and memory deficits. The lack of cellular repair often leads to heightened emotional irritability and a sharp drop in daytime motivation. This visualization shows that up to 35% of all adults complain of these insomnia symptoms at some point in their lives. However, a smaller fraction, roughly 10% of the adult population, endures a severe chronic form of the condition. The condition is driven by a deep psychological paradox. Sleep is an involuntary biological process. When an individual attempts to consciously force themselves to fall asleep, the resulting anxiety actually stimulates the brain, making rest increasingly elusive. Insomnia in this form is a systemic failure. The body's biological drive to repair and restore itself is entirely overridden by its own desperation for sleep. The cycle nearly always begins as acute insomnia. This is a short-term disruption, typically provoked by a specific, highly stressful trigger, a sudden job loss, the death of a family member, or immense pressure at work. Environmental factors and modern lifestyle habits frequently serve as these initial triggers. Frequent travel across multiple time zones, irregular working hours, and shift work actively dismantle the body's natural circadian rhythm. Chemical and medical variables can also initiate the cycle. High intake of caffeine or nicotine, unapproved dietary supplements, or underlying physical conditions like asthma, hyperthyroidism, and chronic pain keep the nervous system artificially activated. For most individuals, human biology is resilient. Once the initial stressor resolves, the work deadline passes, or the illness clears, the nervous system settles and normal sleep patterns naturally return. But for approximately 1 in 10 adults, the resolution of the initial trigger provides no relief. The environmental stressor passes, but the sleeplessness remains, evolving into a long-term affliction. A temporary disruption in routine effectively hardwires a dangerous new biological baseline. The initial cause fades, but the body learns to maintain a state of permanent wakeful alert, turning a passing issue into a self-perpetuating disease. Clinicians define this persistent state as chronic insomnia. The diagnosis is applied when sleep disruption occurs at least 3 nights a week and lasts for more than 3 consecutive months. At this stage, the disorder is sustained by a psychological feedback loop. The deep anxiety of not sleeping pushes the brain into a state of hyperarousal. As the person worries about the consequences of another sleepless night, the brain floods the bloodstream with stress hormones. Through repeated nights of this stress, the brain forms a neurological association. The bed ceases to be a sanctuary for rest and instead becomes recognized as a battleground of frustration and anxiety. This medical schematic illustrates how hyperarousal cascades through the body. The constant influx of stress hormones takes an immediate toll on the cardiovascular system, elevating the risk for arrhythmias, high blood pressure, and long-term coronary heart disease. The damage extends into the immune system. Without the deep rest required for cellular defense, the body becomes highly susceptible to infections, while systemic inflammation increases across multiple organs. Further down, this continuous stress response alters the hormones that regulate metabolism and hunger. Patients face a significantly higher risk of developing obesity, metabolic syndrome, and eventually diabetes. Chronic insomnia actively damages the brain, the heart, and the metabolic system. It is a severe physiological breakdown that requires urgent, targeted clinical intervention to halt the cycle of deterioration. Driven by exhaustion, most people attempt to self-medicate. The typical first line of defense includes over-the-counter sleep aids or laboratory-made synthetic melatonin supplements. However, clinical research has not proven these unapproved treatments effective for chronic insomnia. OTC antihistamines can cause severe daytime drowsiness, while improper use of melatonin can actively disrupt the body's control of blood pressure. Physicians sometimes turn to prescription hypnotics or barbiturates to force the brain into an unconscious state, but these chemical sedatives are generally recommended only for short-term use, carrying steep risks of cognitive impairment, physical falls, and chemical dependence. A proper clinical diagnosis bypasses quick fixes. It requires an extensive sleep history. In complex cases, physicians order polysomnography, an overnight sleep study to track brainwaves and blood oxygen, ruling out hidden physical obstructions like sleep apnea. Diagnostics and sleeping pills are insufficient on their own. Medication only masks the symptom by temporarily sedating the nervous system. True recovery requires retraining the brain's conditioned response to the bed itself. The clinical gold standard for chronic insomnia is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI. It is a highly structured, first-line treatment designed specifically to dismantle the psychological anxiety loop. A core component of CBTI is stimulus control. Patients are instructed to get out of bed if they cannot sleep within 20 minutes. The strict goal is to force the brain to associate the mattress exclusively with sleep and sexual activity, breaking the link to anxiety. This is often paired with sleep restriction. This counterintuitive method severely limits the total hours a patient is allowed to spend in bed. By forcing slight sleep deprivation, it builds up a massive natural biological sleep drive, eventually consolidating fragmented rest into deep, continuous sleep. These methods are supported by strict sleep hygiene. Patients maintain rigid wake-up schedules, keep their rooms dark and cold, and eliminate screen light and caffeine hours before bed. Sleep cannot be forced into existence by sheer willpower or heavy sedation. It is a delicate biological environment. Recovery comes through safely dismantling the anxiety loop, allowing the body to finally remember how to rest.